construction, smells of corruption. I manipulate to recreate this air to go down saga. Go under my karma. Go on my karma. Two hemispheres, battling. I'm blown to the maxim. Two hemispheres, battling. Sucking up. One last breath. Take a drag. Off a death.
Hey, Austin, Texas, how you doing out there this beautiful, beautiful evening, an election evening at that. This is Jeff Contreras, and if you've tuned in already, well, you should know you're watching There4iam, the philosophical show with a political edge, and we have got a special treat for you tonight. Not only are we going to be talking about initiation and Freemasonry and other types of esoteric groups, not only do I have more than two guests, but we have Kory Kortis on from Esoteric Science Roundtable, and we will be continuing tonight's show on his show on Friday night. So, before we get into this meaty show, I want to go ahead and thank my sponsors. First off, Orgone Wizard, great people over there, OrgoneWizard.com, Life Energy Devices, and more. And also Ohm, the metaphysical supply shop where all paths meet. Also, I want to remind you all, we do the Metaphysical Study Group the third Wednesday of the month, but we're not going to do it this month, March, because of South by Southwest. So no Metaphysical Study Group this month. Hello? Where? Okay, yeah. No Metaphysical Study Group this month, so don't go next week. I will be on next week live, but I think Kory's show will be preempted because of South by Southwest. And speaking of Kory, I'm going to go ahead and just let him go to him so he can introduce our first guest tonight.
How's it going, Austin? I want to thank you guys for viewing, and I want to thank...
Look at the camera.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm talking to the mic.
Thanks.
Television.
Thank you. I want to thank Darcy Kuntz for coming on. He was a guest on my show previously talking about the Golden Dawn tradition, and so we're going to have him on again this evening, kind of fleshing out a little bit of what we got into previously, and even a few more things on top of that. So Darcy, thanks for coming on. Darcy is an author and historian who is residing here in Austin, who has a lot of insight into these things, so we're glad to have him on board this evening.
Thank you. And also joining us tonight on tonight's show, I have Omega Bodhi, a modern-day initiate who has been a student of esoteric schools for well over a decade. And we're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff tonight. And if we have some time, we're going to try to be taking at least 10 minutes of calls, but we're going to try to maybe even push in 15 minutes. What do you say, Kory?
I'd like to try 15 if
all right, 15 minutes. Okay, so... we've got a lot of stuff to talk about, so we might as well go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. Yes, both of you. And it might be a little bit confusing because of the way we have the camera set up tonight, folks, but just bear with us and just listen to the content, and I'm sure you'll enjoy tonight's show very much. So, just getting started, tonight's topic is initiation, Freemasonry, and esoteric schools. I want to just tackle that from the back order of that and talk about just esoteric or mystery schools in general, and just just where they come from. Can you just briefly touch on that?
I had a little thing to say about that, because we were talking about Egypt and we were talking about Greece, and I pointed out and would like to say that the tradition itself goes back into prehistory. That in the ancient days, there were these reindeer shamans stretching from Europe all the way to the steppes of Russia. And they dressed up in reindeer antlers and carried magic bags. And the one thing that distinguished them from other types of activity at the time, we're talking 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, was a belief in another world, and that they could cross over into this other world, meet with spirits, go on spirit journeys, meet their totem animals, and attain a lot of power, and became healers. And so that, in my mind, when I think of the initiatory experience, goes back that far.
Okay, now the thing about my understanding of the shamanistic traditions is sort of like in each tribe or small culture, you have one or very few shamans or medicine men, and they perhaps it's might even be along the family lines. They pass it on to their sons or daughters, and that the shamanistic tradition stays very small. It's not really for the whole culture or the whole tribe.
It's similar, though, to the way Tibetans do it, and that is often a child is identified as having supernormal powers. That child is then brought away from the parents to the current elder shaman and is actually initiated into this new path. In other words, there's an identification involved.
Okay, so it's almost like they have a propensity for it, or this is just a natural inclination to be more religious, and so they just get pushed in that direction.
Right, they have a deeper connection with that other world.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
But I guess what I was saying is, from that then evolves or developed what we normally then think of when we became more enculturated and we had civilizations and cities formed like Sumeria and Babylon. Then we get more into what's more common for our experience.
So we see this tradition, this mystery tradition, unraveling, and also the dispensation. I would say, it does accommodate the society in terms of the fact that there's always the inner and the outer, and so there is the priest class, obviously, that's going to be the keeper of the information, and they're going to wield it, hopefully according to the best good for their people, their constituents. But there's also a dispensation that's available for the people at large, and so outside of just specific candidates, I would say there is at least some dispensation that's still available for the people, in general as well. Did you want to add anything along those lines as far as that's concerned?
Right. I think a lot of this was a reenactment of myths that they were trying to connect up with their, the divine source.
So always a path. This path of initiation is a path of return to some spiritual divinity, obviously.
Right. Okay. And one other thing you mentioned, the power of the initiatory class in the ancient world revolved around timekeeping. The priests of these ancient initiate orders would keep time. They would come out of the pyramid and declare in 6 months there will be an eclipse. They kept the astrological knowledge. They kept the knowledge of the rising and falling of the Nile.
Okay. And I think one important thing is in the development of the cultures, once the city started becoming bigger and these shamans or these other priests start moving into larger cultures, the mystery schools start to develop and they start to emerge. And I think that's where you really start to see a broader distribution of the information, the spiritual information, just being given out to all who choose to seek that. And I think that that's one of the important things of the mystery schools that a lot of people just don't seem to take into consideration. A lot of people think the mystery schools are set up just for the elites and for stuff like that, but it's really not. It's about earnest seekers. It's about people who come and just want to know themselves. It's just like the ancient Greek mysteries. They used to keep that above their portals there. Know yourself. It was one of the key things in their quest for knowledge.
Although that might have been a fairly recent development in classical terms, because it might have been more elitist, say, in the Egyptian days when you had pharaohs and the actual priests, and they would shave their hair and live in the pyramids. But by the time you got to Greece, you found a more democratic like in Athens, for instance, the cradle of democracy, you found a much more wide acceptance of the mystery schools amongst the whole population by that time.
Yeah, because in Egypt, they went through a lot of trials to get new members, new initiates. So yeah, they were very elitist back then, I'd say.
In fact, in the Egyptian trials, many of them didn't survive. They'd actually die during the trials.
During the process of initiation, that's true. That is an important point to bring up as well. Was that ruling? Maybe we could go into some of the details, perhaps, of what would a candidate, going through the initiation process during that time, perhaps actually encounter, either physically, astrally, whatever the case may be, and to get some idea as to why that may cause a death to an individual going through this process.
The mysteries themselves were pretty much lost, but we have stories out of people like Plato where they had to cross pits of burning fire, crawling through the darkness. The initiation of Plato, who supposedly went to Egypt, it recounts some of this, and they would have things where something would give way and they would have the feeling they were falling. And then there was a test where they would be brought into this chamber right near the very end of the initiation, and the actual priests at that time had daughters and children, and they would be put into this nice little place, and then the daughters would try to tempt them and to test their purity. And there was someone right behind the screen, and if at any point they violated the trust, then they were immediately murdered.
Oh, okay.
But if they resisted the temptation, you'll often see then the Egyptian candidate standing there with the women dancing around him. That's a common image from classical.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, my understanding would be also that during an astral experience, perhaps, if they were actually going through some real, activity, and they were perceiving and envisioning this trial that they were going through at that level, that there could also be a cessation of life, because there could be a shock to the system dramatic enough to, kill them at that point. They wouldn't make it back if they were 3 days in the tomb, so to speak. If they were doing that process where they were removed at some level, the etheric or the astral, so-called, those aspects of ourselves were removed somewhat from the person during the process.
I tell you what, you're hitting on a lot of good stuff, but before we jump maybe perhaps over to some people's heads.
Sure.
Maybe we ought to talk a little bit about what exactly initiation is.
I kind of thought that's what that was, but please. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead and continue, because you're hitting on a lot of really good points there, and I just don't.
That would be more of the culmination of the initiation process, going through these specific tests or trials that are, again, a culmination of a specific endeavor or work, that at a certain point there's going to be a perception by those that are maybe controlling or whatever, the teachers, whatever term you want to use, that deem that certain individuals are ready and ripe for an initiation process to commence. Then they will go through this test or this trial that, again, is a commencement of work that's taken place, because the very basics have to be put into order, which are just keeping your home life in order, your work life, being a responsible citizen, being a moral and forthright individual, and just the simplest things that are the ABCs for this process to unfold, and then it goes from there. And again, it culminates in these initiation processes. Did you guys care to elaborate a bit more?
Well, that's kind of touching on the qualifications of initiation.
Yeah.
You want to?
Well, the initiation actually comes from Latin, which is initio, which is a first principle of science. But initiation usually signifies being initiated into the mystery schools, or the sacred mysteries of a school that individuals being initiated in.
So it has a specific philosophy or doctrine that one would have to ascribe to and acquiesce to in order to successfully, fill out do the prerequisites to be a member or what have you.
Yeah, maybe approximately. I mean, certainly there's qualifications that would recommend you to be a candidate, and you'd go through these initiations. But whether or not they required of you a certain belief or not, that would vary depending upon the organization you were being initiated in.
Gotcha. Okay.
For instance, the Pythagorean school was an initiatory school, and interestingly enough, axiom was the first principle of geometry. And so when you're doing geometry, also you have these first principles. And in the Pythagorean school, the mysteries were related to geometry and music. So they're, the actual subject matter of the order you're joining will vary widely.
And underlying ideas of form and frequency and all these numeric quantities underlie all esoteric work at
They
some
certainly
level.
inform Freemasonry, and we have the problem of Euclid. The 47th problem of Euclid is a typical geometric pattern that occurs as one of the symbols and emblematic Freemasonry.
So the mystery schools of the past are almost like the associations of today, how we have the American Medical Association, almost like guilds where we have just groups of people that specialize in their own type of knowledge.
Their own kind of spiritual knowledge.
Okay.
Right, that sounds appropriate.
Right.
Cool.
But a lot of times that knowledge was practical information that you could bring into your daily life, and that would help improve your life as well as those around you.
It's true. The modern emphasis is slightly different, I think, than the ancient emphasis. The ancient emphasis relied on the priest, like I said, to tell time and to tell the stars. In the modern world, perhaps what we're thinking of is self-development and improvement or progress of the individual, and then taking part in a larger piece of society.
Well, I know we're going to discuss somewhat. There's the Freemasonic, obviously, tradition and some of the prerequisites and some of the energy, if you want to use that idea, or the stream that's tapped into or that's perpetuated through these initiation processes and this body, this fraternal body. And then there are also other esoteric orders that have maybe more of a, if you want to use the term, magical approach, and maybe perhaps how those differentiate somewhat as far as what is tapped into or just the process at whatever level you'd care to elaborate.
I think that's good. You want to talk a little bit about the differentiation between, say, a magical lodge, a magical order,
and a Masonic
more
lodge.
Freemasonic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we're skipping over some of this stuff, though. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Well,
really?
I think there's some stuff that we need to cover before we get into that.
Okay. Well,
Kinda,
by all
sorta.
means then, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Because before that, I just would like to touch on, because I know when we were talking about this last night, you were talking about the different types of initiation, and I was just wondering if you could just briefly touch on that again, like you were explaining last night, between the various different types of groups.
Oh, right. Well, the actual, let's say, mode of initiation will vary from group to group. So I was mentioning a thelemic order in which we call the AA, and I'm not in the AA myself.
And that's not to be confused with, again,
And it's not the
Alcoholics
Alcoholics
Anonymous.
Anonymous, no.
Right, just to clarify.
And there's various theories about what AA stands for, and I'm not an expert in it,
Okay.
so I can't possibly say.
But
what
no,
it
we
is.
can establish it is an established order at
Right,
some level.
and
We
it's
can,
known as AA. And in that case, the initiation actually seals your attainment, and so you do a certain kind of work, say astral projection, and then you will take an initiation which seals that knowledge. In other cases, more along the Freemasonic or even the OTO, what will happen is you take an initiation and actually then opens up degree material for you to study moving forward. And then there's other modes of initiation too, which, for instance, an initiation in a Wiccan coven or initiation in some other kind of entity would have a different motive or operation.
So some initiations will open you up, and some initiations seal in the knowledge that you've already attained.
For instance, Shaktipat, descent of grace. It's a type of initiation that seals the descent of divine providence. And so each type of initiation has its own motive depending upon the mode of operation. You can think of it as a spiritual process, and so there's many different kinds of processes.
Well, speaking of process, what are some of the processes of initiation, or what is like the process? What's going on? You know, what is it about initiation that causes or affects a change?
I think part of it is, the first thing would be when the candidate is called. You know, they have a deep calling to something greater, and they hook up to a mystery school. And usually mystery schools don't advertise, and what happens is the teacher will appear when the student is ready. And so that's the first process. And then what they do is they go through initiation that where they're received into the mysteries of that school, and they then are given knowledge that they study. And a lot of the schools have tests that you study, or that you
So
take.
an exam as opposed to an initiation trial.
Right. But that's kind of would be a sealing off of a completion of initiation. You study the test, or the material, then you take a test that you know the knowledge.
I have a perspective. This might help. What does it mean to belong to a group that has strong initiatory power? I mean, what do people look for in an initiatory group?
Or if they're perhaps compelled
Right.
to that energy at some level.
And let's think just for a second in terms of transformation power, the transformative power of initiation. And so you might, for instance, become a candidate and go through, and enter into initiation, but in a certain sense it's very alchemical. It's like you're going into the alembic. And for a while, you're not in control. And you certainly, if it's a secret society, don't know what's on the other side. And so there's a bit of terror involved. I mean,
Or uncertainty, at least, to say
definitely
the least.
uncertainty. You go into the situation, you have no control over what's happening. You don't even have any foresight into it. Something happens, some kind of transformation happens, and you come out of it a different person. Hopefully, you then enter a new phase of growth or self-development.
But I think the initiation process is just a potential. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a transformation. You have to work at it, through meditation.
So you're going to get in what you get out of it, what you put into it. In other words.
Yes.
I think
'Cause
that's a very good point.
Because Rigardi, years later, after wrote about that he was, upset or displeased that the Golden Dawn initiation ceremonies never really transformed somebody, but if they actually worked at it, did the meditations, the daily study, then the transformation takes place, because it's almost like planting a seed within you, the initiation process, and you have to germinate that seed and build it up.
And nurture it, obviously.
But that's not universal, because some groups are more external than others. Some are very internal. The inner orders are more internal, say. But there's a lot of exterior orders that also have initiations. And I'm thinking, I won't mention any names. But you
Well,
can,
I mean, everybody's familiar with fraternities and sororities. I mean, almost
Right.
everybody. And I mean, when I think, unfortunately, when I say initiation to people, that's what most people think of, and that's that whole thing.
and it's
Popular
true. It's
culture.
just there's a spectrum, and so
Right.
there's the completely external ones, and then there's the completely internal ones, and most of them maybe fall somewhere in between. But I guess what I'm saying is, and also in a certain sense, there's a laying of hands, or you're just given this power, and it's just the fact that you went through the initiation is itself the effect that they intended to get out of it. So when you're sworn in to be a president of the United States or some office, I mean, it's just the fact that initiation occurs in
Right.
and of itself is the sealing. And
Right.
so,
And that entails a certain energy. Even something like a political office being bestowed upon somebody, there's a certain energy transference and
Right.
all that.
And
The
a
idea of
certain seal
intent and
occurs,
responsibility
right,
and all that.
and like definitely like some transformation instantly occurs. Like before that happens, you're this nobody, you're just a candidate. You
Then
sign
you're-
that piece of paper,
right.
that thing happens, and the
Another
Supreme Court
thing as
judge
well,
like lays his hand on you, and
Another
Boom.
point along those lines too, oftentimes the candidate for initiation goes through a name change after the fact, and this would be forevermore their president such and such after
Right.
that fact, and so that does tie into that level
Right.
as well, so that's an interesting analogy to follow up
Yeah.
on.
Great. Well, let's see. We're about 20 minutes in the show, so actually we're doing pretty good. This whole when you're talking about mystery schools and getting together in groups for initiation, I mean, obviously you can look through history and you can see where individuals have basically initiated themselves through long processes, but it seems that if people group together, it seems to be a little faster or more advantageous or something like that. Is there a reason that people group?
Yes, I think the purpose behind that is that the people have already gone ahead and they established a process that takes people to initiation. I'm speaking of sort of a magical initiation where they've already reached a certain level, and they then impart that magical initiation onto a candidate, and it does speed up the candidate's progress because it's more pointed to to a level that they want to get to.
So the path has already been well trod to a certain point, so that's already the link is established.
Yes.
And then when you have a group formation, as far as added potency of energy, certainly that would have to factor in
Yeah,
as well. Gathering a group formation.
Yeah, because when you get a lot, like 7 people together or 10.
The auspicious numbers that are good for certain work and what have
Yeah.
you.
What happens is the energy builds, not just, one person.
Exponentially,
Yeah.
incrementally. Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was trying to express.
And let me, though, place small group mystery schools into context, though, because there is the notion of self-initiation. And so,
That's a good
if
point
you
to
search
bring up.
around on the internet, you'll find a lot of people are solitaires, or they're just sui generis, and they're into self-initiation. You look further, you'll find that there's some paths where you will have one person initiating one person. For instance, in Zen, Zen masters very pleased if they can find just one person to carry on.
In their lifetime.
In their lifetime, they'll search the whole lifetime, teach all these people. They just find one person.
Quality person.
Yeah, one quality person to carry their lineage. Then, wow, they're happy. And, if they get 2, then they're doing extremely well. You get into the smaller groups. And some things like you have covens that are limited in size to 13. You have some other groups where they're not limited to a certain size per se, but they tend to be small. And then you get up to the lodge size structure, like if you talk about Freemasonry or in the OTO, it's a lodge-based system. And there you can have 40, 100. My Freemasonic lodge at one point had 1,200 people in it. And then there's even larger structures like chapters or commanderies, grand commanderies, supreme councils. So really it depends on the purpose. I mean, when you talk about having 33 people in a particular jurisdiction to do this work, because that's how many people it takes to manage, say, a whole state worth of people.
Is that the idea of quorum that we were discussing?
Right. And so some groups, because they have such a wide range of scope, have to have, a grand council structure, which is like maybe 33 people. But a lodge, which might be localized to a single city, that could only have, it could have 20 people.
Depending on the size of the city, obviously.
Right. And then if you're in a really small group, then you have 12 or less, say.
So, and I think another thing that's important is warrants, lineage, and authority, because like people that do self-initiation, I think that their initiations are valid, and I don't want to play that down, but I think a warrant, in a sense, gives people authority that goes back many years, generationally, that you're getting the same initiation that your grandfather had or that your father had.
It definitely provides an extra sense of confidence and an extra set of authority. We talk a lot in initiatory groups about power and authority. You'll often have the power to do something. For instance, there are some initiations you take where you actually have the power to initiate other people, but you're not granted the authority to do that. And so then there'll be an extra chartering process to become a chartered initiator. This is the way it works in the OTO. You will often attain certain levels where you have certain power, but you're only chartered with certain authorities to exercise things.
Gotcha. May I make one comment about the self-initiation process? I think that is a modern outcropping of obviously communication technology that's available, that internet and things of that nature, vast publication of books, and the idea that this stuff has been made mainstream. I don't want to say stuff necessarily, but this concepts, this science has been made mainstream, and so it is available for the individual that may be isolated in their particular location to be able to still tap into the stream or the current and still get in with, still have the benefits of having that, trod path that they're still tapping into, because,
There's one other possibility coming out of the Tibetan schools, the notion of metempsychosis. Just suppose that you were an adept so powerful that you reincarnated and had access to prior knowledge only after you went some kind of self-initiation. So some people like, I don't know, the Buddha or whoever might incarnate and go through some kind of self-initiatory process.
So put themselves in a maybe not necessarily, well, I'll just say demeaning or belittling compared to their full stature normally, in order to carry out some work, either for themselves or for the greater good? Is that what you're...
I guess I'm just saying there might be some intelligence in the universe that are outside the normal rules of the game.
Oh, I certainly would concede that without question. I think
Right.
we have evidence of that demonstrating, and that's the experimental or experiential, from my viewpoint, benefit of working through these systems, is that you do see these insane synchronicities come together, and you're able to get the vaster vista of what's going on, and so you can, from a vantage point, just have a leg up, a bit of an advantage overall, and that shows as the systems work through your own experience and understanding, and validates that stream throughout time is valid, and it is a scientific process. Also validates that as well. It's demonstratable. It's a recurable process, things of that nature.
But there's a lot of strong reasons to be in a group. Not only is it self-reinforcing, but as you said, the number of interconnections increases exponentially with the size of the group. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that there's a wide range of different kinds of initiatory experiences.
Certainly.
So, and that's even a good reason to look around and understand the environment, the initiatory landscape before you decide to go down a certain path.
Absolutely, yeah. I would say don't be too hasty in any one judgment as to which way to go, because there are so many available that you need to find the proper shoe size and shoe style for you in particular.
Right. That's where self-knowledge comes in.
Well,
and a discrimination factor.
Right.
Well, when you do start checking into groups that do initiation, you might start running into the word egregor, and I was hoping that we could talk about that for just a little bit, because I think people have fuzzy concept of what that word means.
I don't know that word at all.
And we'll talk about egregor, but I just want to point out almost everything we come up with, there's alternate views. And so I noticed, I know Darcy has a particular view of egregor, and it's completely valid. But I'll probably also have a slightly different view. So why don't you go ahead first? What do you think about an egregor?
Egregor is a Greek word, means to watch over. And for me, it's I see it as a group mind that's alive and well, that's nurtured, that develops around a lodge or a temple that meets, an esoteric school that meets, and that is created, and it can be healthy, and it can also get unhealthy.
So you think of it as an entity. It's a higher level entity.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'd say, yeah.
And I agree. I think of the idea of order emerging out of chaos. So when you have a group of people and they're doing a particular kind of work in a magical setting, something will happen, a gel. And a synchronization where something suddenly, like everything's clicking, all the gears are meshing together, and in a higher order, higher level thing emerges. It's like kind of a group energy.
Is it an oversoul? Yeah, is it a universal mind, universal consciousness situation, or is it more like an oversoul?
Well, it would depend. I mean, it's like saying it's
is it both?
It's a thing. It's an entity.
It's hard, I guess, to put semantical terms on something along those lines.
It would matter on the group. For instance, in some groups in particular, there's not just one egregor. I know one group, I won't mention the name. There are two, and there's always two egregors.
Would that be because
and they think of them as angels, and so they say, well, this particular group has these two angels.
Okay, it's not because there's an inner order and an outer order?
Well, there might be, but nonetheless, there's these two angels that are associated with this.
I didn't know if they would be differentiated along those lines, perhaps, or not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the egregor would encapsulate the group's sort of purpose and direction,
and it's, you can maybe help me with this. It's a fairly recent term. The first time I've heard the term applied specifically to a group was with the Fraternitas Fraterni. But since then, I've read other people, and it's becoming more in the modern parlance. But I'm not sure it was actually well in use, say, during the 1800s.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, so it's
very
definitely
recent
a 20th century piece of vocabulary we use to describe group energy in a more magical way.
And I think that's really because that's become more mainstream since that time, since the late 1800s, since the Theosophical Society and organizations have become more mainstream, if you want to use that term, and more known in the public eye.
The magical revival.
Certainly, and that took place a lot of places. We tapped into that a bit on a show we did when Darcy was the guest previously. And again, we will be elaborating on my show on Friday about this topic and some other aspects of it, so that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, of all the groups we talked about, obviously we've mentioned Freemasonry several times.
Which is a cornerstone, it seems, to all and underlies all these esoteric orders at some level, it seems, or there's some kinship affiliation at some level, it seems. Would you guys acknowledge that? That seems to be the case?
Yeah, I would say it's a cornerstone of Western esotericism. I mean, it's difficult to go in any one direction on any of these subjects without encountering Freemasonry in one form or another.
Okay, it does seem to be very common, a commonality.
Yeah, because but also in the 1850s to the 1890s, there was a large outcropping of the fringe Masonic groups, and these were of an esoteric origin, but they weren't recognized by any of the Masonic groups, like United Grand Lodge of England, and so yeah, they.
And that's actually
lodge and magical groups actually were built up around the magical lodge.
Okay.
The lodge.
Well, before we move on to some of the fringe types of masonry, just within masonry itself, there's not just one initiation you take and then that's it. You're like the super master mason. And
do you want to go through the?
Yeah, the Blue Lodge is the first lodge. There's 3 initiations in the Blue Lodge. What you have is Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. And after that, you then work your way up through the chairs. There's 7 officers or 6 officers in the United States, 7 in Canada and England. And you work your way through the chairs, and eventually you become the Worshipful Master. And that's the highest you can be in the Masonic Blue Lodge. And then from there you can...
Well, and let me just say real quick that it's an expression, a saying among Masons that... amongst Master Masons, that really Master Masons are the highest, and so there's like this sense that where the Blue Lodge is the basic qualification to be a Mason, and that all these other higher degrees aren't technically higher than a Master Mason. The Master Mason itself is.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, but the so-called higher degrees.
So-called higher degrees
are just explanations of the first 3 degrees. They explain them in more detail.
So further accentuation.
Adumbrate. Or more like a graduate school, and they talk about the Blue Lodge as like your basic ordinary bachelor's degree, but then the higher grades are more just in-depth studies of the same principles.
And that brings us to the grade motives that you were talking about last night. It's like within going through the different grades, after you become a Master Mason, it's like each grade confers some different type of particular aspect to help enhance your being or your personality, or how does that work?
Or has a different purpose or slightly different agenda. So we say in Freemasonry that we take a good man and make them better. And what did you say? You said in the Canadian Grand Lodge you have a similar expression about the rites of passage.
Well, it's my theory that the Masonic degrees are a rite of passage. Kind of a lost, forgotten rite of passage for the English, British, and
So the great motive.
The boy becomes a man sort of scenario.
Well, taking the young boy and turn him into a man, because in Masonry you learn a lot of morals and ethics and how to live and live in society and be a good person, productive.
Proper conduct.
And let me contrast then to some of the higher grades. In the various higher grades for Masonry, you'll have grade motives that are philosophical. For instance, we just take this person and teach them philosophical principles, and you'll have certain degrees set aside just to teach philosophy. We have chivalric degrees, where the whole grade motive and that purpose is to take a person and make them noble, and it's a chivalry. And take a man and make him a gentleman.
Always try and enhance some sort of a positive quality.
Right.
And again, the alchemal
That's pretty
symbolism
constant,
comes
but
into
in different
play.
directions.
So, and for membership in Freemasonry is some of the requirements is you have to have a belief in a supreme being. So you have to have
Atheists aren't allowed, in other words.
No, atheists are not allowed. As long as if they believe in a supreme being, something higher, then yeah, they would be allowed.
Right.
But any religion can join. But some of the requirements, you can't talk about religion or politics.
So they're apolitical and a-religious.
Yeah.
But they are pro-spiritual or pro-creator.
It's interesting. They're a particular mode of they're a fraternity.
Sure.
And they do teach lessons, and so it's a type of mystery school. But discussing sectarian religion topics is
just not
done.
encouraged.
Right. Well, it's
Okay.
actually not allowed.
Okay, not allowed.
In lodge.
It's that strong. It's just
Yeah.
not allowed. In lodge.
Because with
right.
it in politics also,
Right.
and that's just because these things polarize.
Absolutely, certainly. And the idea is universal brotherhood. Supposedly, that's the core.
Right, and we're trying to bring these people
belief.
together and fuse them together
Right.
and build this larger kind of thing. Remember, the Masons started as cathedral builders, and so you'd get these peoples from around Europe, and they'd come in speaking all these different languages.
But having a common
And they had
craft.
and they'd have these modes of recognition. So, okay, we know you're a craft mason, and okay, you're a craft mason, but now we get together and we form one common group, and then we build this one common cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that was the operative Masons.
And that building theme obviously carries over
And then
to
it
modern
carried
day.
over. We started off as operative Masons, and then in the late 1600s, the early 1700s,
More theoretical.
the philosophers started coming in, and then it turned into what we call speculative Masonry.
Speculative.
The building of man.
Yeah, and we build the temple of man.
Sounds interesting.
Also the modes of recognition in Masonry is like it would be. I see that as a union card.
It is. It started out that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So to get into to be amongst other Masons, you'd have a mode of recognition that allow you into lodge anywhere in the world.
Right.
Okay, besides belief in a supreme being, what are some of the other requirements for Masonry?
Universal brotherhood of man. So the universal brotherhood is a main component. That's interpreted differently amongst people, and every individual might have their own idea what that means.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that certainly is a basic principle that is striven for.
There's also free will. You're joining of your own free will and accord. And basically, to be a Mason, you ask one. They don't go out and solicit membership.
That's right.
And it's not a secret society. You want to maybe hammer that point home as well.
It's not a secret society because all the secrets have been published throughout time.
There's
been
different
a lot
exposés.
of exposés where they publish a lot of the secrets.
And it's not a secret society in the sense that the membership isn't secret. We're actually... And we say that we're not a secret society, but we're a society that has secrets.
Okay.
And
fair
so
enough.
our membership rolls are actually technically public.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, this-
Okay, well, I tell you what. We got about 18 minutes left, and we've got, I think this is about pretty good midway point, don't you think? Once again, folks, if you're just joining us late, we're talking about initiation, Freemasonry, and other esoteric groups, and this show is actually part one of a two-part series. It's going to be continued this Friday at 8 o'clock on Channel 10 on Esoteric Science Roundtable. So, if you have some questions and you don't get to get your questions heard tonight, you can watch on Friday and call in then, and we will try to get your questions answered if we can. So for the next 17 minutes or so, we're going to go ahead and take calls. You can give us a call if you have any questions about anything that we talked about tonight. It's 477-2288, and we will do our best to get you in before the night is through.
Yeah, please be respectful and try to keep it somewhat brief so we can try to get some calls in if at all possible.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay, so let's see here. Hello, line one, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how are
Hey,
you?
Jeff. Hey, Kory. Hey,
Hey.
friends. I just wanted to say, Kory, you're looking all fine tonight.
It's his
That's all.
haircut, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like the long hair, but that looks good too. So.
Thank
All
you.
right, Thanks. Bye.
Okay, I thought she was going to have a
That's
relevant...
a fan.
Hey, Kory.
Okay. Line two, you're on the air.
Yes, I was wondering if you could explain what the Scottish Rite Temple is all about there.
Okay.
Masonry.
Very good question.
Want me to go for it?
Oh, you can go for it.
All right. So we talked about the Blue Lodge, which is the basic underlying structure for Freemasonry.
And
All
those are basically
lodges?
the first 3 degrees.
Yeah, the first
That's
3
universal.
degrees, it's really universal all around
Okay.
the world.
But then
Yeah.
specifically getting to Scottish Rite,
But then what happens is sitting on top of it, almost like we have the Blue Lodge as the foundation, we have sitting on top of it 2 rites. We have the York Rite, which goes up to what's called the Knight Templar degree. And then we have the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite, the AASR, the Scottish Rite, which is the second rite. So you have to be a Master Mason before you can go into either of these. And they're in parallel. So you could, for instance, I'm a Blue Lodge member, and I went up both the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. So these are 2 extra rites. So the Scottish Rite and the York Rite have different modes of operation. They have different lessons that they teach. They have different grade motives. Is that?
And as far as the locations of the Scottish Rite, they're going to be pretty much in every
They organize
country?
in valleys. They are. What happens is there's one supreme council for every country in the world except the United States. The United States has two. So every country, I say every country, for a while in the communist bloc, they had suppressed Freemasonry. And if you look through Freemasonry, it was suppressed
So
in
are we
various
saying
countries.
Scottish Rite in
Scottish
particular?
Rite are in as many countries. There's probably some certain number.
Okay.
Like they might not be in the Vatican. I don't know.
Okay.
Let me ask you this question. Wherever you find Masonry, do you find both the York and the Scottish Rite?
They pretty much operate in all the different jurisdictions. So, like any state you go into in the United States.
So there's
certain- but-
fraternalization, or there's some kind of
Oh
cooperation?
yeah, they share back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all good
Okay.
friends.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
That was a good question.
Yeah, that
Line
was.
3, you're on the air.
Hello, am I on the air?
Yes, you
Yes.
are.
Hello, who's this?
What's your question?
My question is, who's this?
This is Jeff.
This is
Thank you for
Kenneth.
calling. You only get one question. I'm sorry. Line
good
1, you're
one.
on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
What is the difference between Masonry and Freemasonry?
That's a good one. That's actually a good one.
Is there a
I have a
differentiation?
I have an answer.
Please, by
I
all
have an
means.
answer.
Thank you.
So the difference between Masonry and Freemasonry. Well, Masonry originally referred to the operative masons, the people who built the buildings,
Okay.
Basically stone cutters.
actual stone cutters,
Or craftsmen, perhaps.
definitely craftsmen. And then the word free started getting used in the, let's say, the 7th decade of the 1600s, maybe around 1670.
And is that when the idea of free will became more?
No. That's actually when they started allowing the philosophers in. So they had to have a way of what it really was the British aristocracy.
Well, I would say that does tie in then with the idea of free will becoming more
It
embodied
might.
in the mainstream
It
and
might.
being more pervasive.
But it
So
started
basically,
distinguishing
it was a
themselves.
way to distinguish between the actual working masons,
Yeah, they actually
And
started.
the philosophical.
the craftsmen, and the more philosophical men.
Or speculative.
Right,
I
and
guess.
this is all theory because what happened if you look in the historical records, you'll see that the word free just started appearing.
But that is one thing. Masonic lodges, for the most part, did keep pretty detailed records of a lot of the transactions, correct? So there should theoretically be a document from the ancient times forward that's somewhat...
The oldest set of records is from 1699 from Mary's Chapel Lodge.
So that would be a Scottish Rite Lodge?
No, it's Blue Lodge.
Just Blue Lodge, okay.
Chapel. It's a Mary's Chapel Lodge. It's in England.
From
and
1699.
1699 is the earliest written minutes, but we have like archaeological evidence that it goes
that
earlier.
the tradition carries back further, certainly. Okay, understand.
Did you have anything to add, Darcy?
I was going to say that, but also today now it's basically Masonry and Freemasonry is used the same to mean the same when you're referring to Masonic organization.
Yeah, I'd say in esoteric circles they're equivalent or synonymous, but you will if you go to Handy Square, you'll find books on masonry, and that
Right,
does
certainly.
refer to actually putting stones together.
Gotcha.
Okay, and actually, what you'll find here in the southern jurisdiction or in this part of the world is that you even have the Prince Hall Masons, and I didn't know what a Prince Hall Mason was until here just recently, and maybe you could help describe to the audience what exactly is Prince Hall Masonry.
Prince Hall was a black mason, I believe in the 1700s in New York City, and the 1800s, because he received rituals from Albert Pike and had a charter from overseas. There was an issue between the northern part of the United States and the southern part of the United States at the time. And so it created quite a bit of controversy that there would be black Freemasonry.
That's
So-
very interesting in the light of the fact that a lot of people allege that Pike was the originator of the so-called KKK as far as
There's an
what
answer
people
to this.
popularly consider
Yeah.
the negative.
My understanding, my formal understanding of this, and is that he created an organization called the KKK, which only lasted a few years, and it was actually a legitimate civil vigilante group.
So just in the
He
same sense
closed
that...
down that ceased to operate after the Civil War.
And
several years later, that name
It's
was
picked back up.
appropriated.
Okay,
by a
just in the
number
same
of
sense that
other people.
Illuminati has been
Exactly.
used and misused time and time again, and it's taken on many different shadings, although largely negative in many people's conceptions. But that's a good thing to differentiate and understand.
Because the original Illuminati closed down.
Yeah, after only 8 years, from 76 to 84.
And that's basically the Bavarian Illuminati of
The
Adam
Weishaupt.
Weishaupt, the
Right.
one that most people are
Yeah,
familiar with.
1776 to 1784, they closed down. But then the pretenders,
crop
took
up
the
in
net.
mass.
Now, I must say I'm not an expert in this subject, but I do know that there's a lot of work going on, I believe, amongst free-thinking Masons right now
So
to
throughout-
mend like the rift in the South, and that there are northern jurisdiction in other countries where it's really not an issue.
So there's still somewhat of a rift that's recognized, or
In my jurisdiction,
that's unfortunate.
There are two Grand Lodges, one for Prince Hall, one for, and they're the FAM, the Free and Accepted Masons.
Okay.
And then my Grand Lodge is the AFAM, the
Right.
Ancient Free and Accepted Masons.
I understand.
Technically, they're just two separate Grand Lodges. I have, Caucasian friends. I mean, my best friend in the whole world is actually a Prince Hall Mason.
Right.
And so, and we have Black Masons that come visit from the north. So
Okay.
it's really becoming less and less of an issue, and I would like to say that it's a lot of work. It's what Masons do, though, is
Right.
build bridges,
Certainly.
build things, and we're trying to fix this.
Darcy, please. by all means.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got ranty.
No,
Well,
that was good commentary.
I think that in this, but each state is different
Each
because
stage door.
because in some states you'll have the Grand Lodges would recognize Prince Hall Masonry, but in some states they may not recognize Prince Hall Masonry.
And that's what it is. It's all about recognition. So
Authorization or authority.
Actually, it's recognition of other people's charters, and so they actually have legitimate charters. But the question is, does this jurisdiction recognize
Oh, okay.
that one? And it forms like a network of affiliations.
Right. Right.
But I think the more recognition of the Prince Hall Masons is increasing throughout time.
It is.
You know.
It is. It's absolutely growing.
Yeah.
Describe what the caller says. That sound
Yeah, I will. Hello, line 2, you're on the air.
Yes, hi again. Thanks for all that explanation.
No problem.
Another question is regarding the Rosicrucians, and how do you?
We'll go into that more so next week, but maybe just
Well, not,
briefly.
Not next week, but Friday.
Or sorry, later this week rather. Sorry, thank you. But maybe a brief something.
It'd be interesting
Thank
to
you.
touch on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to get a little
Briefly.
intro, just a brief intro, because we'll go in more into detail next
When
Friday.
you could.
Well, briefly, the Rosicrucians started from the 1600s, 16th century with the 1600s with the publication of 3 manifestos, the Fama Fraternitatis, the Confessions, and the Chemical Wedding, and then a lot of Rosicrucian, so-called Rosicrucian groups grew out of that, and then you had 1800s. Well, you had a lot of German Rosicrucian groups, but yeah, a lot of the esoteric groups came out of those 3 manifestos.
But in relation to, let's say, Masonry, the grades, let's say, of Rosicrucianism, or the way that the initiation process works, can you give a little bit of apples and oranges, or are they?
They're different.
Yeah, I have one little spiel about this.
Please.
So, remember how you said that fringe masonry in the middle of the 1800s sort of started happening with the fringe groups. Up until 1837, there were only the Blue Lodge, and it was in England, and it came to France. There was a famous Ramsay oration, and in this Ramsay oration, this Chevalier Ramsay gave a speech, a single speech, in which he claimed that all of Freemasonry had evolved from these earlier Hermetic and Rosicrucian things. And from that point on, there was a huge explosion in Knights of the Rose Croix, there were Knights Templar, all these became integrated into Freemasonry, into the Masonic threads in the 1700s.
And so they did take on a magical or mystical connotation through these fringe or these weavings.
Certainly mystical.
Magical in some cases.
You know what? And in some cases magical, although that would be, they became maybe more fringe.
A lot of these groups, though, kept their traditional lodge structure or system of initiation.
Well, yeah, these
They
were
not-
As a basis.
these were appendant. So you call them
Right,
appendant.
right.
They were additional add-on.
But I think what you're saying is they used the basic grade structure for Masonry to build their grade structure for the other groups that they were
I don't know,
adding
that's
on.
what I was asking.
Well, like
about.
for example, there was a famous college at Clermont, which was a Jesuit school, and they housed the Bonnie Prince Charles. That was the whole Jacobite conspiracy thing in France, And so they added these 25 extra degrees, and they included in the Knight of the Rose Croix.
And when did this take place?
That was the rite of perfection.
Rite of Perfection.
Yeah, yeah.
This
But
was in the middle of 1700s. It was 1762.
Okay. And so this was like, for instance, Eliphas Levi. I know he was going to
It was
school.
much later, though.
It was later.
Yeah, he was in 1800s.
Because
more
he was
in the
going
second
to school
wave of,
to be a priest at some point in time. Then he got all the grimoires and he got all the occult literature made available to him. And he's like, hey, I think I'm going to check this stuff out.
Oh, yeah,
Forget the
he-
priesthood for now.
He's part of the French occult revival.
Certainly,
French
yeah,
occult,
without
yeah.
question. But
those French, they just
revived.
they revived.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Just try to squeeze in a few more calls. Line 1, you're on the air.
Yes, can you? Oh, I was going to ask about the 33rd degree Masons. How they always seem to be really prominent politicians and mostly very wealthy gentlemen. If you could speak on that.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Do you want to go, or should I, or
Well,
both?
yeah. Well, basically, 33rd degree is not. The requirements are not monetary or anything. It's the service that you put into Freemasonry that you're recognized. It's an honorary degree, so that you've been involved. Raising money for, like the Shrine has the Children's Hospital. They also raise money for scholars. I mean for scholarships for people going further education. So all this kind of work. The 33 degrees is kind of a recognition for the work that Masons have done, but the
And it's
you-
limited, so it's a limited thing. There's only 33 of them per
state
state.
or yeah
Okay.
But-
okay. Well,
or
please
no
continue.
not per state.
Oh,
but-
per Grand
is it-
Council,
no, it's per state, right?
per Supreme Council, or state, or Valley.
But nonetheless, there's a limited number.
I'm not actually one of them.
And as far as if
I
you're
must
going
say
to
that.
do percentages, would you say that it does seem
I would
that
say,
they
and like I
seem to
said,
be in
I'm
positions of
only
power?
a 32nd degree, and so I'm speaking
From
out,
that
out of
perspective.
school here, but
Right.
I don't know. But I must say that if you've met politicians or wealthy industrialists or movie stars, they have a lot of magical juju. I mean, there's some mojo going there. It's like
Right.
not everyone
So
is
they're
a
tapping
famous
into some stream,
industrialist. I mean,
perhaps.
something's going on, and so there is some deeper power there.
Okay, so it's not just the connections as far as the, hey, you wash my back, I'll wash yours. You're saying they get into the stream, and so they tap into that energy, and they get the benefit of the energy more so than just the handshaking benefits and the.
Yeah, I believe that they're special people and that they are recognized for what they've done and for who they are and the power they have.
Understandable. Okay, I would tend to agree
Yeah,
with that.
but the politicians, movie stars are going to be more known because they're out there. But there's a lot of people that are 33 degrees that nobody knows about that are
That's right.
just common people.
Okay, that's kind of what I was trying to get
Yeah,
around
there are
to,
lots
full
of those
circle.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, well, we're closing in on 2 minutes here. And I just want to remind everyone that this show is going to be continued on Kory's show, Esoteric Science Roundtable, and you can catch it Friday night at 8 o'clock from 8 to 9 on Channel 10.
Right.
We will continue this discussion. We'll be talking more about fringe masonry. We'll be talking about magical initiations. We'll be talking
Templars.
about the Templars. We'll be talking more
Rosicrucians.
about the Rosicrucians.
Strict observance.
We'll be talking even about the Golden Dawn, some Wicca,
OTO.
OTO even. So we will be
AA.
talking about a lot more stuff, and we will be taking your calls as well. This is what you have to look forward to this Friday. And don't miss Kory's Show Friday because he won't be live the following week. Also remember, for those of you tuning in late, there will be no metaphysical study group this month. No metaphysical study group. So don't circle your calendar for next week.
I want to mention
Don't
one
worry
last
about
thing
that.
as well. Also, a fellow Access host, Alex Jones, is going to be on Coast to Coast AM Thursday night
Thursday night.
from, I guess, probably midnight on or sometime
Okay.
in the early AM.
Nobody called to tell us about Mike Hansen. When I came in to start the show, Mike Hansen was in third. Last I checked on the internet, but the race was pretty tight. It was within 500 votes, and I think only 3% had reported other precincts. So hopefully on Friday, Mike Hansen will be the constable of Precinct 4. If not, well,
Good
Precinct
run.
4. What were y'all thinking? See you later,
Thanks,
Austin.
Austin.
Actually on Friday. Bye. Love you.